So today we are going to be talking about what is happening with the Advancing as a Profession project. There's a bill that was in the Senate. Susan will give you some updates around that. I'm going to be sharing some pieces around history. We have an opportunity for you all to share and also ask questions. So the structure today will look like a presentation by myself and then into Susan, and then sharing some things that have been happening in the workforce, some different questions that have been asked. And then we're going to, or excuse me, yeah, questions that have been asked, and then into a conversation with intent where we seek information from you all. And then we'll definitely have time for questions. If you have any questions that pop into your head, please feel free to put them into chat. We always take the time to look through that. And your questions really inform our work and help guide us with the things that we need to look at and the pulse of what's happening in the field or the workforce and the things that are weighing on other people's minds. So with that said, typically these roundtable sessions, we cover what I like to call the meat and potatoes in the first 45 minutes. And we recognize folks are probably being pulled in a lot of directions at this time during the day. So if you do need to log out, you certainly can once we get to that point, and I'll make sure to let you know when that is. We are going to record today, but we're only going to be recording the content portion. We won't be recording any questions you all are asking us or our give and take conversation at the end.
And
So I'll go ahead
Rachel,
and,
other
oh, sorry.
people are coming in. I'm not seeing anything. Are you?
For what? I'm sorry,
You're
for people.
letting people in because it's not showing on my screen.
Oh, it's not. Okay, I just saw the one when you started talking, so I hit the button for her to come in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but we
okay, I'll
probably,
keep monitoring that. So if you all hear me kind of pause, I'm just letting someone into the room. So Susan, you want to go ahead and put the slides up?
I will do that.
Thank you so much. Perfect. So again, our update for you with Susan and myself. So the first thing I wanted to do is, again, just ground us in the history. I think it helps us to understand the journey this work has taken, and especially if anyone new joins us, it's kind of hard to understand where things came about. So we've been at this for, oh, Susan, you're on the wrong slide.
Yeah, sorry.
Nope, no worries. We've been at this since 2018, and there was a lot of work in the early years around just engaging with the workforce to see if they wanted to move forward with considering advancing as a fully recognized profession. And this has always been a grassroots approach. And we've really had a focus on gathering the voices from the workforce, ensuring that we have representation from all the different settings and different members within the field, and that people have had an opportunity to engage and really weigh in on their future and the future of the early childhood workforce. That's been really important to us. And here we are, we're at this monumental time in history where Vermont actually has a bill had a bill in the Senate this legislative session, S119. And this is really a time for celebration. We look at this work that's happened in 2018 where we were asking, what do you think? Do you want to move forward with this? And you see those numbers down there. 96% of the folks we engaged with, over 58 conversations, said yes, either all or at least parts of it. Only 4% said, no, let's hold up. Let's not do anything. Then we moved into phase two. You see that's from 2019 to 2022. We all remember those times where we learned to become proficient on Zoom and we wore masks, but we did keep the work going, and we checked in with folks about their thoughts around what's the identity you see yourself carrying, the three designations, which are the roles that members of the workforce are in, and as well as the preparation to be in those roles. We also talked about compensation and, of course, professional licensure that adds that accountability. Phase three was working with the ecosystem, making sure that we had our systems lined up and informed and ready to think about what did implementation look like, what was actually going to be needed. And I've read this hundreds of times, but I'm going to read it again. All of this contributes to our goal, which is from the unifying framework that each and every child, beginning at birth, has the opportunity to benefit from high quality, affordable, early childhood education delivered by an effective, diverse, well prepared, and well compensated workforce. And I will tell you, each time I read that, I feel more and more empowered. At first, we knew that was a dream, and over the last several years, we've seen that start to come to fruition. And it's a pretty exciting time to be an early childhood educator here in Vermont. So, with all that said, these voices went into the Sunrise application that was submitted to the Office of Professional Regulation. You'll hear Susan reference that in her talking points, and you might hear us refer to it as OPR. That's just the acronym for Office of Professional Regulation. So, I want to talk a little bit with you now about how a bill becomes a law, and that can look a little bit different. The slide up on the screen is kind of the traditional process. And if we think about where this originally started, we had a document from NACE, the National Association of Education of Young Children, that was the model legislation. We also had all the feedback from members of the workforce, our stakeholders, and that was put together with what is called the Sunrise application and submitted to the Office of Professional Regulation. So traditionally, a bill is introduced into the legislative session and it travels through a series of committees. And it can go either first to the House or to the Senate, but it is passed by one of those and then travels into the next set of committees as it transitions to the other legislators. And so with this particular bill, Susan will walk you through, it looked different. And that's okay. We know that the legislative process is complex, and we've known all along that this particular bill would be a 2-year strategy. And we also had learned from the Office of Professional Regulation that it's really unusual for any bill like this that does create a new profession to move through in just one session. So the slide up on your screen kind of shows the pathway in 1 year as it goes through the House to the Senate and then over to the governor to be signed. The process we're going through is much more complex. Vermont has a biennium structure. And so what that means is when the bill is unfinished during the first year, it picks up on the second year right where it left off. And so Susan will explain more about that, about how S119 finished up in the Senate and what is coming up on the horizon for us. She's also going to walk through what that next legislative session might be like, what we can anticipate, and we'll be talking with you further about that, giving you an opportunity to weigh in on that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Susan and let her share some more information with you.
Thanks, Rachel. And you may know, we went into this legislative session supporting this bill, which is OPR's, the Office of Professional Regulation. It's actually their bill. And so Vermont AEYC was in the position of being supporters as opposed to pushing the bill through ourselves. And we thought, oh, this could pass in one session. And it didn't. And yet OPR had told us it's very rare. It almost never happens that a new profession is established in one legislative session. It typically takes two. So we've learned a lot along the way. This first slide I want to share with you, let's see, down here. So there have been a whole lot of numbers flying around about this bill, and I just want to kind of walk you through what these different numbers mean. So originally, we heard the number H182. That was the original bill that OPR had introduced, and it was going to go to, and did go to, the House Government Operations and Veterans Affairs Committee. That committee did not take it up. They had so much on their plate that they did not wind up working on the bill this year, and actually put a pause on it until 2026. I'll tell you a little more about that in just a minute. So that's H182, and it's the content is what we think of as the original bill. So then in mid-March, all of a sudden, the Senate Government Operations Committee took up their version of the bill. It's all the same content as the H182, but it has a Senate number on it. So that's S119. And so that bill actually did pass through that Government Operations Committee with amendments, which I'll go through a few of those with you in just a minute. And it was attached to a larger OPR bill. They have a bill every year, the Office of Professional Regulation does, because they regulate so many different professions, and there are always different changes that they need to make from year to year. So they attached it to that larger bill so that it could go through the rest of the Senate committees. It went through Finance, and it went through Appropriations, and that bill, with some changes to it, the amended bill, you see that in green, passed the full Senate as a part of that big OPR bill. So that's the second number, S119. The third number, H472, that is that larger OPR bill that this was attached to, so it could make it through the Senate this year. And once it was passed through the Senate, S119 was stripped out of it so that the whole House passed that larger OPR bill, but only the Senate had passed the part that has to do with early childhood education as a profession. I know this may sound a little confusing, but I'm just wanting you to have a sense that there were different numbers attached to this. So here's the next part to know is in 2026, that original bill, H182, which the House never took up this year, will be started with the House Human Services Committee. And that's going to be the original bill. It won't have the amendments that the Senate Government Operations Committee put in that passed the Senate. So in a sense, they're going to be two different bills. So that slide that Rachel just showed you that showed how when it comes through the two different bodies, then there are committees that have to kind of reconcile it so they actually go to the full legislature with one bill. So all that being said, what you may just want to know is there are different bill numbers, and now you have a sense of why that is. So I wanted to share with you some of the amendments that the Senate Government Operations Committee put into the original bill that did wind up passing the full Senate. We don't know what will happen with these in the House, but this is sort of that bill as it came through the Senate. One was added preparation that would qualify for licensure. So they added a piece that said that if you were going to apply for an ECE 2 license, an Early Childhood Educator 2 license, and you may recall that the preparation is an associate's degree in early childhood education, the additions were or a related field. And they also added the idea that if you had an associate degree in an unrelated field with a minimum of 21 approved college credits in core ECE competency areas, that those associate's degrees would also qualify an individual for an ECE 2 license. I know that's been a question that's been coming up a lot because there are certainly folks in the current workforce who have associate's degrees and are in positions where they're leading groups of children, and the degree may not be in early childhood education. So this was really important to sort of broaden the inclusiveness of who would be qualified. And then the same kind of language for an ECE 3 license, that again, a bachelor's degree in early childhood education or a related field, or a bachelor's degree in an unrelated field with a minimum of 21 college credits. So that was really expanding and seemed like an important thing when you're moving from the current system to the future system. And then another change that came through the Senate from the original bill was that anyone working in a CDD regulated program as of the date that the legislation takes effect, who could qualify for an ECE 2 or 3 transitional license, that, and you may recall this was in the original bill, that license lasts 2 years and then can be renewed for 2 years. And this is as people are finishing the qualifications to get a sort of regular license, not a transitional license. And what the Senate added was an additional 2 years with progress. And then the idea that was in the original bill that it could still be renewed for extenuating circumstances. So in effect, the timeline for those transitional licenses was extended from 6 years in the original bill, potentially, to a potential 8 years, allowing people more time to do the things that they might need to do to qualify. So that was an important change that we want to make sure you're aware of. And then there was a fourth type of license that was added. This was a revision as the bill moved through the Senate. There were quite a number of family child care folks who raised concerns about the kind of a heavy lift that they would have to qualify for an ECE2 license, even with a transition license. And so OPR, as well as the Senate committee, really heard them, and this was a compromise and additional fourth legacy license. So just to explain what this is, its title is Family Child Care Provider, and folks who would be eligible for this would be in a regulated CDD program, currently practicing and in good standing as at the time the law takes effect. They must apply no later than 6 months from when licensure begins for this particular license. It's non-renewable if you allow it to lapse for 2 years. Let's say the person isn't running their program for 2 years, doesn't renew within that time frame, then it's not renewable. Otherwise, it is. They can continue to renew, but if they let it lapse, they can't just sort of come back in later. They also added this particular license to the fee structure, and they assigned 1 seat on the Early Childhood Education Board for someone who was holding a family child care provider license. So it's kind of interesting to think about 3 licensure options for current folks who are running family child care programs. They may qualify for this particular license. They may decide, I'm going to get a transitional license because I want to complete the requirements and get my associate's degree, for example, or my bachelor's degree, or they may already apply for those things. So it kind of broadens the options. So looking ahead to 2026, and again, remember that this is going to be the original bill, H182, that will start in the House. We think that there are possibly 5 House committees that will be interested in hearing this. It's going to start in Human Services. We think the Education Committee may be interested, and then the Government Operations, Finance, and Appropriations. We know that there's going to be a steep learning curve for legislators. This is a very complex system. Early childhood education is, and they're not steeped in it like you are. So it really takes a lot for them to sort of wrap their brains around all the different parts of this that they need to understand. There are no guarantees that what comes out of the House will look like what came out of the Senate. It may not. There are also, as you know, no guarantees that it will pass. We're always waiting and working to see what will happen. Once again, OPR will be in the lead role, and once again, Vermont EYC will be in a support role as we did in 2025. So providing testimony, writing some op-eds, tracking the support for the bill as well as concerns, doing extensive outreach and keeping people updated about what's happening, and also putting out occasional calls to action, asking people to contact their legislators. And then there also is going to be, as there has been in the past, an advocate structure. How do you get involved as an advocate in supporting a child care legislation as it's moving through? You may know that Let's Grow Kids is sunsetting at the end of 2025, but I want to let you know that there is already planning underway between Let's Grow Kids and Vermont EYC to ensure that that advocacy structure continues into 2026, because we'll need to continue to be very active. So I think just one other piece I thought you might be interested in. I was just preparing some notes for a presentation to the National Commission on Excellence in Early Childhood Education. That's our national governing body. And so some things we are anticipating as we work with the House in the next session. Again, I mentioned the steep learning curve. And so really helping legislators to understand who licensure is, who we're proposing it's for, and who it does not apply to. For example, it does not apply to family, friends, and neighbors. It does not apply to after-school programs. It does not apply to folks who already are licensed under the Agency of Education. So really being clear, and we expect some of the same concerns to be raised, perhaps from family child care providers who, may feel a heavier lift in the transition to licensure from one system to the other, from public education folks who have been concerned about whether there's going to be confusion about terms, and there was someone on the Government Operations Committee early on who said, how is this different from babysitting that my kids had with the nice lady down the street when they were little? So just, again, it's part of the learning curve. We also expect there will be folks in the workforce who haven't engaged over the past 6 years, to whom this is brand new, and they're going to need information, and they're going to have a lot of questions. We know that there's an ongoing concern about staffing shortages that people raise, and worrying that this will make things worse. So we need to make sure that we're continuing to provide information about how this is going to positively impact recruitment and retention. And then questions about compensation. How's that going to move with this? So those are just some things that you can be thinking about that will be likely questions that come up. So I think that concludes the main things I wanted to share with you today. Rachel and I had talked about taking a brief pause here just to see if there were any particular questions about what happened this year in the legislature and what we might be looking towards. If we can answer them, we will. And if not, we have another legislative wrap-up session coming up in a couple of weeks. But let me get out of the slides and we'll just kind of see if there are any questions before Rachel does the next piece.
I see Andrea's hand is raised. Andrea, go ahead.
Thanks. In the slide before the last one, you were talking about family childcare providers, and you mentioned something about them not being able to apply, or to apply no later than 6 months from the licensure beginning. Can you tell me what that means? Is that mean they can't wait to the last minute? Does it mean they have to have a window? I'm not sure what that means.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So if you can imagine a timeline in your head, right? So let's say this passes the whole legislature in 2026. OPR has proposed in the timeline that then there be 2 years to do rulemaking and establish a ECE board. So there's 2 years right there that everybody has, right? And then once licensure begins, so this was now 2028, what the proposal is that within the first 6 months, anybody who's working in a CDD regulated family childcare program, they should be applying for that legacy license within that 6-month period. And once the 6 months is over, which let's say is January of 2029, there won't be new family, legacy licenses. So they've got a window of opportunity there. Does that make sense, Andrea?
Yes, I didn't quite get the starting and the transition. That makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
Beth?
And just to clarify, that was an amendment to the Senate bill. That language is not in the House bill that will be considered by the House in the next session.
Yep.
Yet.
Yeah, we have to keep reminding ourselves of that, right? Any other questions? Okay, so Rachel, you have a next piece, and then we'll hear a little more from folks.
Absolutely. So we are getting a lot of questions, and we know folks are very worried and excited, and a whole mixed bag of emotions about what this means. We've heard a lot of things, and I want to share some of those specifically with you. But we know moving into this next step with the House next year, more things will come about how does a recognized profession affect me, meaning each individual? How will it affect my staff? What do I need to do? What are the benefits? And so we want to make sure that everyone has accurate access to information, and we will continue making sure that there's important updates coming out that carry this information over the weeks and coming months. And for me personally, I've had a lot of great conversations with early childhood educators wondering about specific things related to them. But I know they're not just unique to them. They affect many, many people. And I want to take some time to share some of those questions. One of them, Susan touched on a little bit before, and it was one of the amendments made to S119. And again, we don't know if that amendment will stay. We don't know if there'll be others made. We can't predict what will happen, but we can speak to what's happening right now. And that was a question from an early childhood educator that had a degree in an unrelated field, and they wanted to be an ECE2. And they were wondering specifically, what do I do with that? And if I remember correctly, I think this person had a degree in history, and they were wondering, well, what do I do? And so the amendment that is part of S119 recognizes that a person has a degree, whether it's an associate's or a bachelor's degree in an unrelated field. And the amendment was, instead of having to complete a full new degree, that the individual, the early childhood educator, could earn 21 credits in early childhood education. And the exciting thing about that is a lot of times folks have those types of things. A lot of people that came from the medical field have human growth and development already, or they have introduction to psychology or sociology. And so some of the folks we worked with, when they are seeking this information, we always say to them, go and send your transcript to Northern Lights and ask them for the highest level career ladder certificate you can get, and how far are you on your path to your next one? And then they can really find out what they have that qualifies and what they need to build upon. And a lot of them are finding out, oh, wow, I already had 9 credits towards that. I didn't even know. And so that's the really great thing about accessing Northern Lights. Another question I had was from a family childcare provider. They wanted to be able to continue to operate their program, of course, and they were a little concerned about, what did this mean? Am I going to be able to operate? Well, yes, of course. The on-roading ramp is quite lengthy, as Susan shared. And their question was, well, do I have to become an ECE3 or an ECE2? And as we went through that, I could see where their confusion came from, because when you look at the different breakdowns, ECE2 leads a group of children up to the age of 5, and an ECE3 leads children up to the age of 8. And they were really concerned about not being able to provide care to school-age children. And so that does get a little confusing. And of course, people are new in the field, or they haven't had a chance to engage, or they might not have been part of the conversation specifically when we talked about that. But to be a family child care provider, the designation is ECE2, and absolutely 100% can continue to provide care for those school-age children up to the age of 12. And I know license even has exceptions for past the age of 12. But the reason for that is the primary education for school-age children would come from a public school, a private school, or homeschooling. The role of an early childhood educator would be a secondary care support role. So they would not need to be that ECE3. ECE2 is sufficient for a family child care provider. Another person asked me, well, how does this benefit us? How does it benefit early childhood educators? And that's a great question, and it's really, really complex, but it's a super important question, because we all know our time is important and we need to understand. Go ahead, Shana. Thank you for joining us. We need to know what is happening. And so that is complex, and there's a lot of history in this work that's been happening. We are standing on the shoulders of giants that have been trying to push this movement along for many, many years. But most recently in 2023, Vermont increased investment of 125 million. And in 2025, they added another 5 million into increasing the infant toddler rates by 5%. And so we are seeing those increased rates. If you remember when I read that audacious vision, I said, we're seeing a lot of these things come to fruition. The early childhood educators being well prepared, well compensated. So those things are beginning to happen. The other thing is that there's been a lot of investments, whether it's in bonuses, through professional development, stars. There's been a lot of loan repayments. There's also been supports around education. Again, we talk about well prepared. I want to make sure I don't lose my notes of all the things that have happened. About being well prepared. Those things have been happening. There's a lot of access to education and trainings at little to no cost happening in Vermont with an investment of millions of dollars to help support and prepare the early childhood workforce here. We also know that this investment comes with accountability. And the Office of Professional Regulation bill has been designed with specific input and research from Vermont's early childhood educators. Again, this is a grassroots project collecting feedback from them, and it allows for 8-year transition period. And again, that's really, I think, exciting that is such a long on-roading. Why do I always say on-roading? On-ramp to make sure to support early childhood educators. And we don't want to take the chance of losing anybody. We want to make sure that they have the support they need. And that legacy license for family childcare providers and opportunity to continue providing care. And there is continued significant investment around that accountability piece. We know that's really critical and that we are going to need to have continued resources and helping early educators meet new standards. But we're not done yet. We're not even close to being done. We need to continue to advocate, and we will be successful with this work in the advocacy and continuing to request increased wages and really working towards early childhood education in Vermont being a recognized professional. That is our goal, and really focused on that. So those are a few of the questions that we've had. It's been pretty exciting to have folks reach out directly and say, hey, I haven't had an opportunity to be part of this. Can you tell me how this affects me personally? And we know if one person is asking, that means there's many, many more wondering that exact same question.